So, hello everybody. Welcome to yet another Capstone chat. And this time we are very privileged to have Ashely Batten, or Ashely Hawkins as I knew her. But she graduated in 2011 from the COMM department, and she went on to become a public defender here in the Panhandle, and she works with juvenile offenders. So she has had kind of a different career path than many of the others that have gone before her. But she went on to WVU after she graduated from Shepherd. So I hope you all join me in giving a warm welcome to Ashely. It's all yours, my dear.
Well, thank you, Miss Monica, and thank you all for being here. And please think of questions and otherwise. Monica's going to help moderate that and figure that out because I'll get all kinds of distracted otherwise. But as Monica said, my name is Ashely Batten. I was Ashely Hawkins back when I was at Shepherd. I did graduate from Shepherd in 2011. And at that point, I was the first in my family to graduate from college. I graduated from Shepherd with a communication and new media degree, and my minor was in political science. And it even took, I want to talk a little bit about my time at Shepherd, just to kind of figure out how I got to where I'm at and what it led to law school. And the help and support that not only Monica, but Kevin and all the teachers that you have and professors at Shepherd can give you to kind of figure out where you're going. So to put things in perspective, from 8th grade on, I knew that I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I had gotten involved with the first and only completely student-run television station in the state of West Virginia, which was JCS 19. By the time I graduated high school, I was mixing on audio and visual boards, multi-camera shoots. I was setting up those cameras, shooting those cameras, editing those, writing my own scripts, doing interview shows, doing scripted shows. I was working with a really great team, and that led me to Shepherd, where I continued in communications and wanting to go because the program seemed exactly what I wanted it to be. I am a lifelong Jefferson County resident. I laugh, I'm not born and raised. My parents, I was born in Leesburg, but as soon as they released me from the hospital, came over here. I went to Jefferson High School. And from there, Shepherd was one of those things that at first seemed a little bit too close to home, but I have to tell you, the professor sold me on the department. And I always speak so highly because of the support I had while I was in your all's shoes. So I really wanted to be the next Katie Couric. That was my career goal. And she herself is from Arlington, Virginia, which wasn't too far away. And I could see myself doing that. From that point, I started and did about 2 years of COMM straight on. And I got myself an amazing, and I'm not sure if he still teaches or not, but Dr. Gergis in the political science department was an incredible wake up. And so I went from less Katie Couric to more Anderson Cooper. Decided I wanted to go more the political aspect of things. And that kind of changed my choices on what I did. And things such as in game theory and doing with the game class, I'm not even sure exactly what it's called, the class name anymore, Monica. But when it came to game theory and we had to do blog posts, I asked Monica if I was able to do them on lawsuits that involved video gaming and how it dealt around that to be able my topic to work on that. And even with topics and things, we did my partner and I did a Secret Service version game, trying to kind of keep that politics and interesting and learning while we did it. So about my junior year, I had what I call this epiphany. And I realized that I wasn't done with my education. I wanted to continue to learn. I knew that a master's in business was not my key thing. I looked at a master's in public administration, and the idea of spending an entire semester learning about scheduling was like knocking my head on the wall. So at that point, Savannah Guthrie had joined the Today Show. And if you can't tell, I like the Today Show. And she herself has a degree, a law degree from Georgetown. And she actually was one of the highest passers on the Arizona bar, where she's from. So I said, well, watching Savannah Guthrie, she interviews all the important people because she has a law degree, she knows what questions to ask. And I felt going into reporting was very reactive for a long point. And I really wanted to do something more proactive with my life, the investigative reporting, asking those kind of hard questions. So I went to Monica and said, I want to go to law school, but I don't want to leave communications behind. And I think this will work out in the long run. I hadn't even decided at all I wanted to practice. I was just going to go to law school and then use it to kind of say, let me interview people. And Monica was fantastic. And she worked with me and helped me figure out which classes would be helpful for me in my communications degree. And I continued with my political science as a minor. Through this time, I became more politically active on campus. And I happened to meet at that point, the West Virginia Secretary of State, Natalie Tennant, was on a tour of West Virginia. And through my organizations and through the Political Science Honor Society, I was able to meet with her. And through that, somehow they took a chance on a girl from the Eastern Panhandle. They had never had an Eastern Panhandle intern in their office. And I was able to get an internship with her for the summer after graduation. Well, that's what led me to my Capstone project. My Capstone project, now I was thinking about it before I came on. It sounds really weird to say it now to a group that's grown up on Twitter and grown up on Facebook, and all of the elections around when you probably paid attention have been on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram and things. But in 2011, we had only really had the John McCain, President Obama situation. And that was the first chance that they actually had real political influence in social media. And I decided that I was going to do that and run a social media campaign for Natalie Tennant, who was running for Senate at that point. Actually, no, she was running for governor at that point. With that. So I allowed that opportunity and ran it by Monica, who allowed me to be able to work on, I did a website, I did Twitter, which was almost brand new at that time. And then also I did a Facebook campaign and was able to actually orchestrate events up here where Natalie was able to come, but then also learned all about the analytics. I learned all about reaching out and messaging and how important that can be in the PR aspect of it, but also learning about this new frontier, which would become what we know pretty much as politics today. So I've been doing all of this, and I was studying for the LSAT and trying to get everything to do. And like I said, first in my family, kind of either go college and beyond. All this going on, I applied for law school and they waitlisted me. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I got a message from law school an hour before I walked for graduation, and I had been denied. And it was one of the most soul-crushing moments in my life. And I'm so thankful to have the support that I had of my family, who my mother told me I had an hour to be sad, but it was the happiest day of my life. And I needed to act like it because my grandparents were coming. But also of teachers like Monica, who I felt this weight because I had felt somewhat that I had somehow let them down or otherwise because I didn't know what I was going to do. And I'll never forget, on graduation day, I let Monica know that I didn't know what I was going to do. And I didn't know about law school in the fall. I had accepted this internship in Charleston that I knew nobody down there. I had just found an apartment by luck. And Monica gave a lot of support that day. And, you'll work this through and you'll figure things out. And that belief from your professors, even after you graduate, even on your graduation day and forward, they want you to succeed. So I took what is voguely called a gap year now, but pretty much I had a year off in between when I went to undergrad and law school. During that time, I took that jump into Charleston. To be honest, if I would have gotten into law school, I probably would have backed out of Charleston just because to be able to prepare for law school and otherwise. And that was something that, kind of like those unanswered blessings, because through that time with Natalie Tennant, I was able to not only grow as an individual, which would make me stronger for later on throughout my career. I worked a lot with their community outreach program. and used all of the Adobe products that I used here. I was able to create pamphlets that they hand out to kids in schools. I was able to work on video production and work on messaging for the team. I was able to make myself a real big asset resource to them in that political aspect. I also took that time to run a half marathon in Disney World. And that taught me a lot of things about strength and mind over matter. But overall, I was able to get into law school, and we laugh about it now, but I took the time to kind of really refocus, because I very easily could have just said it wasn't for me and tried something else. But I took the time, I thought about it, rewrote all my stuff. I took the LSAT again. I have real bad test anxiety, like super bad test anxiety. And on top of that, Miss Monica always realized nothing ever came easy to me either. I was always the first one in the Mac lab and the last one in the Mac lab, working on things, working through things, because things just didn't come as fast to me. And at the end of my letter for law school, which you don't have interviews anymore, they're personal statements, I said, please, I'm from West Virginia. If I'm going to practice, it's going to be in West Virginia. I want to come back to the state. I want to do this. Please think about how many times you want to read my application, because I'll continue to apply until you let me in, because I'm not going anywhere. This is what I want to do. And at that point, if you have a drive for something, don't harass people. But if you have the opportunities to keep on it and keep moving forward, don't let one no derail you. So I went to law school, and through that, I was able to immensely use a lot of the tools. And I'll talk about that more later when you have questions and otherwise, that I learned in communications, not only in just classes, but also preparing for my future. I had an amazing internship locally. I did all my internships locally in Martinsburg, and was able, through networking, which is so important. And I want to talk about a bit about that later, because that's something that goes all levels, how important networking is. I was able to land a job with a local judge. And through that job with the local judge, they kind of knew that I wanted to be a public defender. I had prior internship with the office and fell in love with the people here and the work that they do. It's very interesting. I had a case through an internship that really got me this way. Was I helped represent somebody in a private practice that was charged with a crime, and he did not meet the elements of that crime. And it was the first time for me, and he was indigent, so he didn't have money, and the court had appointed us to help him. And it was the first time in my life that I realized that people that get charged with crimes may not be guilty, and that there are people that happen and what goes on. And through that representation, it really opened up the world of public defense to me. And it really made me decide that I want to practice and I want to do this. So I was able to get the public defender job through the judge that I worked with, and clerking with him, which is like being his right hand assistant and helping him with his decisions and that. And to be honest, I loved my judge. I worked for Judge Wilkes, who is retired now, but used to be the chief judge of the 23rd Judicial Circuit, which is all the courts in Jefferson, Berkeley, and Morgan. And I love my job. I loved my judge. He was really helpful. I was learning everything. I was in court every day. I'm a people person. I was never going to be that lawyer that sat behind a desk all day. And that's one reason I love trial work and being a public defender. And I really had this great opportunity, and there was an opening in the public defender's office. And they don't come around too often, because the people that end up in this work fall in love with it. And I took the job and snatched it up with the blessing of my judge, and with the blessing of the PD's office that had offered it to me and wanted me to come back. And I get there, and at first they told me I was going to work with misdemeanor cases and a little bit with kids. And I said, okay, I can handle this. Foot in the door. And when I got my foot in the door, they looked at me and said, by the way, you're not working with misdemeanors anymore. We've had to change everything up in less than a week, and you're working with kids full time. And they shuffled me in to a meeting with an attorney that had been working with juvenile defendants and juvenile law for 8 years. And I got like a 3-hour brain, like, what is going on in juvenile law? And I smiled and I took my notes and I went back to my office and I cried. I cried and what did I have given up? I had given up this great job where I was learning things. Now I'm going to be stuck in this hole working with kids. I'm never going to be able to get that misdemeanor. I'm never going to get this experience. I want to be, where things are happening. And 5 years later, it was the best decision I've ever made. And I kind of laugh at myself when I think about how I thought what I thought was a step back was truly my strongest bounce forward, and moving on into what I believe is my passion and my career, and honestly, what I think I've been put on this planet to do. I work with kids that are charged with crimes, but they're kids mostly that have mental and behavioral health needs. And the whole point of juvenile court is to be able to help them rehabilitate. Everything is sealed and confidential. For all the flaws it has in a lot of other legal areas, West Virginia is fantastic when it comes to protecting children and helping them get rehabilitated and helping them get the mental health support they need. A lot of kids end up in the system because their families are dealing with the opioid crisis, or they themselves have become involved with the opioid crisis. So the support we get from that. But through these last 5 years, I have been able to be involved and see kids go from what is the worst day of their lives to getting their task diplomas, graduating high school. I've been able to get not only graduation announcements, but actually be able to go to and be invited to a ceremony by one of the juveniles I represented. So to be able to see them successful and go through and be able to conquer those mental and behavioral health needs is a huge thing. I'm now to the point where I'm so grateful and honored that individuals are asking and reaching out to me to help advocate for juveniles on more of a policy side level, which is a different thing in which I'm using these communication bases that I've learned in COMM as well. I've recently been appointed to the West Virginia Public Defender Services Juvenile Task Force, which is a statewide organization that they pull together individuals involved in juvenile law. It is a very nuanced. So to break it down, I deal with the same kidnapping, sexual cases, batteries, all the same adult laws. I'm just in a different arena, but it still involves juvenile prisons, juvenile jails, rehabilitation, other things, and a lot of services supportive. But overall, I'm excited to be in this place where I can now do a little bit more on a higher level and be able to help from what I've learned working with my kids. So I know that was a lot. I realized it as I was spewing it out. But any questions you have about any aspect, I would really appreciate. And going into I do trial work, so I am in the court in front of judges and otherwise, and there's a lot of communications that goes with that kind of thing as well.
We've got a question from Terrence.
Yes, hello.
Hi, Terrence.
Yes, hi. I just had a question about how your communications degree has helped you with your job now.
There is a lot of ways, and I'm so thankful that I have the background that I do. Things that the point blank, so there's different things in communication. So advertising and imagery. When you're in court, you have exhibits. So understanding how you're going to want to portray your information and give that information on a slide to the jury. So juvenile cases have the same felony rights as an adult. So we get 12-person jury trials. So not only do I not have to outsource, just from personal knowledge, little rusty now, it's been 10 years or so, but not only do I not have to outsource making those presentations and making those exhibits of the information and pictures and otherwise and printouts, but understanding how to best acknowledge that information and give that to the individuals and give that to the jurors is something that's helpful. I think if one of the classes that I never thought would actually super apply, which I laugh now, is when I was going through, I want to call it media studies, but it's not. It was Kevin's media theory class. And understanding, I never thought that would apply to anything more than storytelling. And I remember it was right around my junior, senior year when I was going to law school and that kind of thing. And I didn't think I would need it. When you're in court, it's all a story. How did your kid get to this point? Explaining to the judge why the decisions your child made, or why there is evidence that doesn't support the charges. And understanding jurors like a story, jurors like a reason why. And unfortunately, when it comes to the criminal justice system, there's a lot of dehumanizing of defendants from very beginning. With my kids, it's the fact they're called juvenile respondents. You never call a kid a juvenile unless they're in trouble. So things like that, and being able to say, well, you know, Bobby Joe, you know, this happened to him. So the judge understands the underlying circumstances that led you here. So being able, when you go to trial, you have a theme and a theory, and honestly, it's everything involves that. What questions you ask your third witness needs to lead into that theme and theory and build on that story. So I noticed that the theory classes really helped in an aspect with that. Some things overall, general speaking, and being able to address, and now a lot of our court is on Zoom. I was talking to Ms. Monica about that before we came on. So being able to be comfortable in front of a camera is something that helps as well. You have the choice to either call in by phone or appear by video. I like appearing by video because I feel that I can better advocate. There's so much that your face and how you say a word and otherwise can be thought of and focused. Honestly, as much as I like being in person, because it's hard to answer questions of a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, and I don't have that ability when I'm doing Zoom court, but not having the mask on, because when you're in court, of course, we're masked now. Being able to show emotion with my whole face to continue that story and underlying and emphasizing is something that's helpful with Zoom court. So I find it sneaks in whenever I don't realize it. At first I was like, well, it's cool. I can make these exhibits and this is easy and I can control this. But the more I got into it and the more I was advocating, really understanding the theories and understanding PR comes into it too, because you kind of have to be a hype person for your clients sometimes. Public defenders, but specifically juvenile defense attorneys are what's called an express interest advocate, which means I don't care what's in the best interest of my kid. And that sounds really bad. Now, personally, I do. Personally, I want these kids to succeed. And as soon as I meet your child, they are one of mine. I don't have any children of my own at this point with my husband. So they're all mine. And I go straight on mama bear. I will, you know, I take the in and I will advocate. But when it comes to court, I'm the voice for that child in court. I am their ability to be part of that conversation. So there are times that kids have me ask for some really, I had to argue one time many, many years ago that a place for treatment was haunted because the child at the time did not want to go. He was younger. He was like 9, 10, but he didn't want to go and get help and treatment. So I had to straight face look the judge in the face and say, Your Honor, I do believe that, Your Honor, we advocate that this place is haunted. So there's a lot of times when you're able to do that PR aspect and to understand and argue what needs to do at that point, you have a lot of that into it as well.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Taylor, you have a question.
Yes, so you said that you took a gap year. I know one of my nerves is not being able to get a job right away after graduation. Do you have any advice for those of us that might have some extra time between graduation and starting our career? Like any advice as to what to do within that year?
I would say continue to work on yourself and your skills if you're not able to. So for me, as part of that time off, I actually sat in and audited classes at Shepherd because I wanted to make sure that my brain and mind were continuing in what I wanted to do when I got to law school. So if you're looking at the communication based, you're in such a different place than I would have been 10 years ago. So I would say podcasting or other things along those lines, that if you're interested in radio and otherwise and not able, help create that portfolio. If you're into videos and other things along those lines and creating that, most of the time, if that's where you want to go, start doing your own, making sure you're keeping up those skills that you've learned. And then also network. And be able, as long as you can support yourself financially, unpaid internships have been the key, unfortunately, to me getting places where I need to go. I was like super excited when I actually had an internship that paid. But keeping up in those options and figuring things out where you wouldn't have those options to be, I think would be another thing. Also, take your time to focus on yourself a little bit. College is stressful, and job searching is stressful as well too. I jokingly said that my backup job 10 years ago was going to be, if I didn't get into law school again, I was just going to go and be, it was that time, the Redskins, but a Redskins cheerleader. I was going to apply in that. And to me, having that kind of, even though it was kind of a joke, but a backup gave me some other things. I did work part-time during that year off, but I did do experiences that I thought would allow me to focus and grow as well. So that's where the half marathon came from. I had an idea that I wanted to run a half marathon. I had a really bad injury when I was in high school. I was a cheerleader that took me a while. So I got into running and decided, you know what, it's now or never. When else am I going to have the time to run 3 hours or more at the gym to be able to do that? So things that would help you with personal growth while you're working to find your professional, I think would help support you through that as well. But it's always a scary time, especially when you don't know what you're doing. And on top of that, I graduated before most of my friends. And I was living in Jefferson County, and most of my friends were still at Shepherd. And it was definitely something that was very nervous to me because I saw where they were continuing to go and I felt like I had stalled out. But honestly, looking back at that time, it wasn't a stall out. It was a time for me to continue to grow and move. And once I continued to feel like that, then I was able to make the most out of that time.
Thank you.
Jessica, you've got a
You're
question.
Hi, yeah, I have a question on if you had any advice for making the jump into a new position. How you were talking about you had this position that you felt really good in and comfortable in, and you took that jump and 5 years later it turned out to be the best thing. But because we're going to be in a situation eventually maybe like that, us coming up to graduation, do you have any advice for how to weigh that decision to jump?
First, acknowledge that it's terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. And I was very lucky to have, well, long story short, my younger brother is a Shepherd graduate as well, and he has a degree in fine arts and painting. And it helped that my parents had used the whole do what makes you happy thing on him for many years while I was in law school. So making the jumps, and because it was a pretty substantial pay cut as well, to take the position from working with the judge to working with the public defender's office. One is the money different wise. The state legislature does the public defender's stuff as well. So it was a bit of a pay decrease, but I was able to have people around me that was supportive in that and be able, the best way was I kind of surveyed ideas as well too, whenever I had that fear. But I think you know yourself to a point at some point. I'm definitely a big fan of pro-con lists. And even up until my last day, I sat there in front of my judge and said, do you think I can do this? And he was so incredibly supportive of me going for it and doing that if it was something I really wanted to do. And what he said to me too was, are you going to sit behind this desk and write memos? So a lot of my job was researching ideas, making memos, working with the judge, figuring out what we thought was the legal idea. He gets the final decision, of course, because he's the judge. And he said, do you envision yourself doing this the rest of your life? Well, no, Judge. I sit and stare at the courtroom like Ariel from The Little Mermaid. I want to be where the people are. So I knew that there was along those lines, but still making that decision was terrifying. So I almost compare it to enjoying that leap. And you have to make an educated guess. Make sure that financially or otherwise that you're not going to be incredibly, I knew at that point I would be able to handle the decrease. And I had a lot of people around me that were very supportive at that point. And I knew that I was able to have support for where I would be living and other things along those lines. Because you have to think about that kind of stuff too. But I have to say, going with your gut and following your gut is the biggest thing. And it's kind of like if you haven't met your significant other now that you're married to, when you know, you know. And I thought that was a load of just like bull until I met my husband. And then it was that moment of when you know, you know. And when it comes to making that big leap, if you can see yourself, envision yourself there, making that leap is terrifying, but sometimes it may be rewarding. Like I said, I cried. I thought I had made the biggest, like worst decision that I could ever have done. I left this great opportunity. What was I going to do? You know, this and that. I just thought, and I didn't know where I was going to go otherwise, because I had told myself this is what I wanted to do for so long. And being able to kind of take that, work through, and then start seeing where it was definitely, I very much lucked out into falling into my passion. So if it's something that may not be exactly what you want, but it's a foot through the door, you don't know what kind of opportunities you have. So long story short, weigh your odds, but if your gut says go for it, you're the one that's going to be able to jump for it.
And
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I can testify that just from my experience with Ashely is when she decides on something, she commits. You know, she doesn't put sort of, I'm going to test the waters here. She's like, no, I'm diving in fully without a life preserver. And she commits and she swims real well. So, Amanda, you have a question.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting just listening to you and hearing how communication degrees can apply to law, like especially criminal law, because I think a lot of people think like when it comes to criminal law, you would usually have like a political science degree or a criminal justice degree. So I think that's really interesting to hear. And I was wondering, are there any other concentrations of law, maybe like civil law or family law, that you feel that would be good for communication students to go into?
Absolutely. I would say any area of law in which you litigate, so be in front of the courtroom, I think would be a fantastic fit for a communications degree. I think my job, the two areas of law that I was really good at. So your first year of law school, you have to take your law gen eds. So you know how you have to go through all your gen eds at Shepherd, you have to go through your law gen eds. So you have to do criminal law, contract law, property law, frankly, because after the next 3 years, they're going to test you on this stuff and then you'll never think about it again. Thank the Lord, I have not touched property law since I passed the bar. But family law was one that really clicked really well with me. And then criminal law was. And what's very interesting is where I ended up in the juvenile justice system is kind of a real mix of that, because you do deal a lot with those questions and things along those lines. So I think any area of the law, like family law, you do have a lot of working with people and advocating in front of the judges. There are family law judges here in Berkeley County, and every county has a couple of different ones that kind of move around. Civil litigation is like that as well. The only caveat with civil is if, say, you wanted to go to a firm, you spend the people that are the litigators that are in the courtroom are ones that have been there they've worked up the partner track. There's many, many years where if you do go into civil law, if you're in a bigger firm, that you're not going to be able to see the inside of a courtroom for a long time. So that's one of those things that if you view as something that you might be a strength, then that would be something. But if you go into private practice, in law, you're able to put up your own shingle, as they call it, and go into private practice on your own. And if you want to do that, then you'd have more of an opportunity. But any law like that, I would say real estate law is not one that you really see the judges a lot. You're not in the courtroom a lot. A lot of title work and otherwise, which is fantastic for attorneys that don't want to talk all the time and that don't feel comfortable in front of a crowd. Because there's so many caveats in the law that allows for strength sets in individuals like me who like being around people and like talking. versus individuals who may not find that to be their strength, but they're incredible writers. Writing is a huge thing in the law, and a big focus, because a lot of times judges and otherwise, you may not be able to get in front of them. But on that note, blog posts and things that you have to do with communications are incredibly helpful, because a lot of times you'll write these really long, big arguments and really long pages, and you know that the judge is only going to read the first page or so. You're taught that. So being able to take your information and succinct it to a point that allows all your information to be contributed in 1 or 2 paragraphs before you dive in is also a real helpful thing that I learned from doing the shorter blog posts and being able to figure that out. But overall, any place of litigation where you're going to have that courtroom experience and that courtroom option really helps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Serafina.
Hi. My question is, do you feel that your communications degree helped you prepare for law school, or was there like a big transition between your undergrad and law school?
I think college itself prepares you for law school to a point. I do believe that compared to other areas of study, communications leaves you a lot of time to be able to focus on your projects, and you have to learn to be able to schedule your projects. And I always wondered why Monica was so, at that point I had a Google Calendar for my COMM Capstone. And she was very specific on making sure everything was on there and what was going on and happening, because you do have to be able to work multi-levels of projects and other things. And that was a big support in law school. So in law school, you have about 5 classes, and you have them throughout the different times of the week, but you have to read between 100 to 200 pages per class. And they do what's called cold calling. And it's to prepare you to be called on by the judge when you're not expecting it. So you get your picture taken during orientation, and you sit in a assigned seat, and the judge has a picture, or the judge, yes, that's where I am, and the professor has a picture of everybody, and they just call on you out of nowhere. And they may call on 5 kids that day. They may call on all the kids that day. You just never know. And so you need to be able to be on top of everything and be able to speak if you need to speak. And it's kind of trial by fire. It's called the Socratic method. And it gets you to kind of think on your feet. But the thing is, you need to be able outside the classroom to be able to juggle your projects, deadlines, and other things, because these classes aren't just learning, they're pretty much deadlines. You have to be able to be prepared to give your information. So I think learning from communications, being, okay, well, I have to have this ad for advertising and imagery. I need to be able to do this for animation, and I need to be able to have my paper for history of TV. And being able to understand how to control and handle those multiple projects, I think was definitely very helpful for law school. Along those lines, be able to have that skill set to help you prepare.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Anybody else have a question? I'm just going to bring up a funny story with Ashely. Ashely, do you remember your graphic novel with the?
Yes.
I would never have thought that, this young lady that I was teaching would go on to be a lawyer, but in my graphic novel class, she took Barbies and dressed them up and took pictures of them in situations and made a political novel with Barbies. Just so you know, the kind of person that would come in the morning and just be fixated, but she'd have, a Barbie in her backpack. It was really it was interesting. It was different. But this is,
one of the kids that sat beside me, I was crowdsourcing Barbies because I didn't have enough to do it. And what this really came down to was when I was at Shepherd, I was on the Promise Scholarship, and I worked every Tuesdays to help pay. And then I was also involved with Greek life. And I also lived close enough that I went home on the weekends to be close to my family and otherwise. So I was juggling a lot of things in the air. which means that I didn't have a lot of time to set up photo shoots for pictures for a graphic novel. So what's easier than people you can control with your Barbies, and you can set the time frame in the calendar. So my poor parents and roommates, who all had to take part in holding Barbies at different weird angles, and the amount of photoshopping that went into it was incredible. But we laughed because one of the guys in my graphic novel class had a daughter, and so he had a lot of Barbies. So he kind of swiped the ones she wasn't playing with and brought them to me. Well, we kept on using the ones I wasn't doing and decorating his Mac when he wouldn't look or whenever he would leave the office. Andrew, who I still talk to, and he cracked up because it was revenge of the Barbies and that kind of thing. But it was kind of, I did it as an ode to one of my good friends who was a lot of support. He was kind of like the guy, he wasn't a comm guy, but I would bounce all my ideas off of him. So I decided to make the comic book a political one about running for what I called emperor, which was, you know, at that point, making a whole different thing of things. And it was all kind of about him. We're still close friends. We've been friends, gosh, for 14, 15 years now. We were friends in high school and that beforehand. But it was always fun to be able. So when you're thinking outside the box, always think other ways. And if it don't see it done, do it yourself. That was my way to solve a problem. And it ended up being a lot of fun.
It was good too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's memorable. You graduated in 2011, and I still remember your graphic novel, in part too because you used Barbies from Beverly Hills 90210. So
I did.
Pretty
Jason Priestley had a Jason Priestley, I think, was the star.
Yeah, he was. You remember that. One of the first years I taught graphic novel. I have a question too. In terms of, you talked about some of the technologies that you use in your job now. What kind of technology do you use? Like, is it more just database driven? Do you use any presentation software while you're in court? What kind of stuff do you do?
We do. It depends on the circumstances. And honestly, it depends on the courtroom. Some courtrooms are better suited for technology and video wise. When you're doing a opening or closing statement, you're able to have, I know some attorneys use Prezio and have used Prezio for a while, which is a different version of PowerPoint. Of course, old but steady PowerPoint shows up, which makes me incredibly happy that I do have that knowledge and background from computer mediated communications to be able to know how to do PowerPoint and different things with that. So we use that a lot of times when you're doing opening and closings, if you want to continue and have that information and otherwise. Some places have like the middle school, or probably you all didn't have it, but the overhead where you have to do the, actually still have to make the clears on that, depending on the circumstances. But there's a lot of things that you work with. Now that we have the body camera footage, there's a lot of somewhat editing to get that into it, because say you have a 5-minute long video, and in the middle of the video, the cop asks a question and your client gives an answer. Well, you go to court and they determine that the judge says, well, I'm sorry, that cop should not have asked that question. And you say, okay, well, I don't want the jury to hear that answer, but I want the jury to see the whole video, you know, because then you get real dodgy when, you know, you cut things out and things get weird. So you have to learn to use some of the softwares to be able to mute things and be able to edit it and deal with how to shorten the different clips and other things. So that's something that we use as well to be able to do things. You do have your traditional databases and other things to be able to support. Everything is online now. We even have e-filing. So when I started, I literally signed my name to every file, order, everything that I did. And that was such a cool feeling because, you know, blue ink to everything. And that's one thing. You always use blue ink on legal documents. That way, you know what's the original and then what's the copy. But now everything's e-filed and you have to write everything in. And then we go on to an online system that actually pulls everything together and makes and creates the order from what we input. And then files it that way. So it's nice because I can file an order at any time of day and it's in the record. It's not like I filed it at 5 after 5, the judge won't get it tomorrow morning. It's stamped, and the judge may be up late at night, not being able to sleep. And sometimes we get orders entered in the middle of the night because the judge is up doing things. So it allows, and then also we get copies of it to our emails. So for me, it's been able to be in court. Well, is that what that record said? Well, for some reason, if I don't have that order, I can look in my emails and be able to pull it up. So there's a lot of technology wise that we do and handle with when it comes to creating like pictures and things for the jury. I have used Illustrator in that a little bit to be able, just basic at this point, because I'm getting real rusty, to be able to have and understand what I want it visually to look like. Font is still everything. And if that's the one thing you learn from Miss Monica, is that font is everything. It can change just how it's perceived to how it's read, and to be able to use that when I need to for kind of different things that are going on. If I'm getting ready for a trial, a lot of times you create all these things and then you don't go to trial. And that's the hard part of it too, is that if you are given an offer, and if it's something that the child wants to take, or if it's something within the best interest of the child, a lot of times you'll get very close to trial and then not go to trial. So a lot of it is that preparation, and making these things, and then they stay forever in your save box in whatever it is. But there's definitely a lot of the different technology that you can use to integrate. You're muted, Miss Monica.
Oops, sorry. Anybody else? Questions? No? Come on, folks, you're all quiet. I'll wrap up with a wrap-up question for you, because I know that some of our students are thinking about perhaps going to grad school, maybe not in law, but just going to grad school. Is there anything that you wish that you had done while you were an undergrad that would have facilitated graduate school more? Not necessarily just for your topic of being a lawyer, but just, in general.
Thinking of it overall, the only thing that I know when going to grad school that was something that I think was a weakness of mine was my writing. And I think being able to take other courses or continue to work or have somebody look over your writing and help edit it and be brutally honest. I was told one time that I love to, and I tell people too, I love to bleed in practice so I don't die on the battlefield. And that's with anything that you do. I love brutal honesty. Like, please, like, I have no problem with that, because I would much rather handle it when it's not going to impact my future and be able to be ready for that. And I think if I would have done a little bit more, and I even had a poli-sci minor with writing or otherwise when it comes to grad school, I also would say focusing on going straight from undergrad to grad school is really hard. One of the reasons I didn't get into law school is because I just didn't have enough time to study for the LSATs, to write a good entrance essay. My entrance essay, the first time I read this really great book, it was like 100 great essays. And I remember like highlighting stuff from each one of them that I liked, and like kind of like built this one that worked with my life that, kind of hit on these points. And it wasn't as super authentic as I think I needed to be my story. It was still my story, but it was done from points of view of other people. And I felt that was another thing. So I was able to be successful getting into law school the second time because I did have that time to focus on other things like that. So if it means taking that semester off, depending on programs and entrance or otherwise, understanding and having that need for that extra specific time is focused wise. Also understand that a lot of your friends may not can be continuing on your education. And that was a hard pull for me as well, too, especially my last semester at Shepherd. And I lived on campus. I lived up in Miller Hall, which was fantastic for literally running my papers during exams one time. I literally ran down those 2 blocks in flip-flops and handed a paper to Professor McCahan, to Jason one time, because I was running in. But I lived on campus and I was involved on campus. And I think wanting to make the most of that last semester while trying to juggle the real world, bigger implication things was real hard for me to be able to focus on those kind of things. But overall, I think learning and continuing forward and kind of figuring out how to roll with the punches is probably the best thing to be able to be supportive when you're going into the unknown that is grad school, and along those lines. And before I go, Miss Monica, I wanted to add, because I didn't get to say it earlier, I mentioned a little bit about networking, and I wanted to touch on that real quick if I have a moment. Networking is like one of those buzzwords that you hear all the time, but I would not have my job if it wasn't for networking. And I wouldn't have had any of the opportunities I had if it hadn't been for networking. And a lot of that is on you. It is reaching out for those opportunities. And if you see something that might be an opportunity, go for it. I went from when I was at Shepherd, I knew I wanted to go to law school, and I figured because there's no like one degree that goes to law school, but I didn't know, I wanted them to take me seriously because I didn't know how seriously a communications degree. So I reached out to the one lawyer I knew in town. I taught his kids how to swim because I was a lifeguard in high school. I said, listen, I don't care if I am making your copies, getting your coffee. I don't care if you're whatever you want to use me for in the office. I'll take out the trash. I don't care. But as long as I can show up a couple days a week, unpaid, and have your name on my resume. So when I put it in the law school, I have an option. And he had never had an intern before, but I called him up and kind of pitched him that. And it was from that opportunity that I was able to have the background and knowledge and want to really kind of extend law. I took an unpaid internship, and I'll tell you that, please get paid internships if you can. It just so happens that unpaid is where I've found my ways. And I've been lucky to have a family that lives close, and I've lived with my parents a lot. I was very lucky. They were kind. Because for a while I was like paying the city of Martinsburg to park in town, like I was losing money during internships. But I took an unpaid internship with the federal court system. Little did I know that internship, the lady I worked for was a former law clerk for the judge that I ended up clerking with. And when I went in for that interview for the judge job, he said, well, I didn't know you, how did you know that so-and-so was my first law clerk? I had no idea. But it was just that who you know and what you know and kind of situations. The same thing happened when it came to, I took the opportunity when I worked in the federal courts. I worked for the lower level judge, the magistrate judge, but there was a circuit court judge that was there. And I was in the same building. I just reached out and said, hi, you're a judge, I'm an intern. Can I just talk to you? I want to learn. And she was fantastic and allowed me to come in. And when I said I was interested in criminal law, she said, use my name, go talk to the public defender's office, put my name in your cover letter. And at that point, when I got my internship here, they said, we talked to you because so-and-so was in your cover letter. So when it comes to that, the full circle of things. So when it comes to communications now, be nice to everybody in your comm class. Be nice to kindness goes, you should be a kind human no matter what, because life is hard and pandemic life is like even harder. But being kind to individuals will get you so much farther than you could ever believe and ever think. And those steps forward, it hit home in law school, because when we were in law school, the guy that sits down from you may be your judge in like 5-10 years. You never know where they're going to go. So as much as you think that they are being the class know-it-all and you just kind of want to whenever they speak, understand that that person has their own path as well too. And being open and creating those communications and keeping those networks open. I laugh. I added my husband on Facebook for networking. We went to Shepherd at the same time, didn't meet, went to law school at the same time. But we're not involved, and I knew of him through law school. But we laugh because I always laugh when Facebook reminds me that I added him. But I added him because he was a year ahead of me in law school, and he was from the area, and I knew that he might be a resource at some time. Little did I know he was going to be my husband, but a resource at that time. And so keeping those options early, making sure that your decisions that you're making, your reputation is everything. And it's one of those things that once it's hurt, it's hard to get back. So when you're making your decisions future wise and that kind of thing, also you can never be overdressed, always underdressed. Because if you're underdressed, they'll talk about your clothes. If they're overdressed, they'll talk about you. Because they won't ever notice that. So I think those are the kind of things that are not communication specific, but if I could give, letters to Ashely, 10 years ago, it would be those kind of things, and remember how important those things are because they make all the difference. You're muted again, Miss Monica.
You'd think I've never been on Zoom before. Terrible. Well, unless anybody has a last minute question, I think I know I've enjoyed listening to you, and I hope all of you kind of look at, and even if you may not want to be a lawyer, you got something out of this in terms of, the skills and how they can apply in pretty much any discipline that you're in. But thanks so much, Ashely, for taking the time. And if there's any secret lawyer wannabes in here, I'm sure she would be willing to network with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, give some support. Or even if you're not lawyerly and you just want to know, like, how the heck do you try and get ready for tests to get into grad school? I'm sure that, she'd be happy to do a little one-on-one with you because she's that kind of lady. But anyway,
absolutely. And Monica has my contact information as well. So please feel free, because I know I was where you all were 10 years ago. It's one of those that reaching out to those that have been there and giving that support is something I always want to do, because I know that as a first in my family to go to college, I was flying blind into a lot of circumstances. And I know I relied on, for some things, for Monica, for help on things, getting through, even when I was doing my application process, for her knowledge, because she had been through a graduate program and figuring things along those lines as well. So if anybody would need support question-wise or other questions, please just let me know.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everybody.